Would you play a video game where you could wander around the level for the rest of your life, but you're never going to be able to get the materials you need to complete the quest? You wouldn't. You'd be, I'm done, I'm out. A lot of kids don't have expectancy that they're going to do well. And then the value side of the equation is they don't care. And I think in education right now, we have a real problem with relevancy for a couple reasons. If we actually engage in experiences and relevancy and get that emotion and experience and repetition all wrapped up, then kids are going to just be excited and engaged to do the lesson as opposed to having to bribe them into completing things.
What's one brain-based shift they could try?
Okay, I've got one that's easy to do, and as of right now, I have 100% success rate with it, with all the teachers, and I've been in probably at this point 65, 70 classrooms to do this. It works every level, every grade, every kind of kid. So,
Rainbow Sky Creations acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we record this podcast on, the Dharawal and Whadjuk Noongar people. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.
What if the way you've always approached teaching could be explained and improved by understanding how the brain really works? Welcome to Rainbow Skies for Teachers. I'm Alicia, and that's exactly what we unpacked chatting with Lisa Riegel. She has this incredible way of taking complex brain-based research and breaking it down into simple, relatable ideas that make you think, oh my gosh, that's why I do that in the classroom. In this episode, Lisa brings the science behind how our brains learn to life, showing us how repetition, emotion, and experience shape the ways our students engage with learning. But more than that, she helps us connect the dots between research and real classroom practice, so we can teach in a way that truly aligns with how the brain is wired. And the more you listen, the more you'll find yourself getting curious about how our brains work and why we do what we do, and how we can use that knowledge to become not just better educators, but better humans too. Now, Lisa's journey started in education with one clear mission: to help people reach their full potential. And over time, that passion evolved into a deep exploration of how the brain drives behavior and how the systems around us shape success. Now, as an educator, researcher, and author, she's spent over 2 decades helping schools, leaders, parents, and organizations bring brain science into everyday practice, creating environments where people feel connected, capable, and in control of their growth. She's also the author of multiple books, including NeuroWell and Aspirations to Operations, where she dives even deeper into how we can use brain science to live happier, healthier, and more successful lives. Yes, please. I want a dose of that. This is one of those episodes that deepen your understanding, sparks your curiosity, and leaves you with practical strategies you can actually use. Because when we understand the brain, we can work smarter, not harder, and create classrooms where everyone can thrive. You're probably going to want to get a notepad and pen and jot down some pearls of wisdom that Lisa shares in today's episode. Enjoy. Okay, Lisa, we're going to start with some brain basics. From a neuroscience point of view, what's actually happening in the brain when a student is truly engaged in learning?
So when a student's truly engaged in learning, the prefrontal cortex, where thinking and logic and reasoning and memory all occur, is lit up and excited. And not only that, but it's pulling from memories, from different memory centers from your past to link the new information to former information. So essentially, when we're engaged, the whole thing is lit up. And it's operating and it's pulling from all of these different areas, and it's depositing what we're learning into different parts of our brain.
Ah, awesome. So I recall this when I was in the classroom, and you'd often see there were some lessons that you had that just clicked, and there were others that just fell flat. And what does brain science say about why that happens?
Yeah, so we learn through repetition, experience, and emotion. So for us to develop new neural connections, we have to have repeated exposure. And so when you have a lesson that ties into something that they already know, or they can connect it to information they already believe to be true or experiences that they've had in their life, that neural connection happens faster because the road is already starting to be paved. So if you think of your brain like a giant highway, when we're born, it's like a big field of grass. And then through repeated pathways, or think of the highway with an exit ramp, if we go over and over and over that exit ramp, eventually it becomes automatic and paved. It's like in college campuses where they totally should have put a sidewalk there because all the kids are walking along the grass. So it's like that in our brain. And so if you are doing something in a lesson that is emotional or connected to prior learning or something that they already enjoy doing, there's already going to be some pathways that are built, where if it's just completely brand new, disconnected from their life, then the only way we build that learning is through repetition. And then it doesn't last as long because we don't really remember it.
Yeah, so we're aiming for their prefrontal cortex to light up, all those connections to be activating. So like as we say with educators, it makes sense when we do those lessons where we bring the real life or we bring what the kids are interested in. It's that memory bank is kicking in, that repetition. It's already got, at the moment, my daughter's on about Minecraft. My husband I remember when kids were loving Minecraft and we used to bring it into the classroom. And it's like, okay, let's bring on this about, space and bring all the maths concepts. Yeah, when kids are talking about Halloween, you're like, well, it makes sense for us to bring a Halloween theme focus into the classroom for our literacy lesson or whatever it might be. So I guess it's cool to know when you see the logic in it, you go, oh yeah, that makes sense. But your brain is actually backing up the science evidence to go, that's why that works.
Yeah. Well, and that's what the book that I wrote called NeuroWell is like. I hope that it provides like a pair of glasses for people to put on through which they can see their work. So if they have these informed brain-based glasses, then I think a lot of times as they're reading, they have those epiphanies of like, oh, that's why that works so well. Or, oh, that's why this isn't working, because it's not aligned with how our brain learns and what we know about stress and behavior and perceptions and all those things.
I'm just having a think, right? So for me, when I'm working, it might be that I'm going to do a task that I don't particularly enjoy doing, but I set myself an extrinsic motivator. I might go, oh gosh, if I get this done, I'm going to go treat myself to an extra cup of coffee. Say we're in the classroom and we do have rewards. And I guess ultimately we want everyone to be intrinsically motivated to do something. But what's the brain science about all those intrinsic motivations?
Yeah, there's actually the couple scientists that won the Nobel Peace Prize for work on motivations and rewards. The reality is it's not just kids. This is how we operate too. And so the research is super clear. When you are trying to create a new behavior, it takes a lot of energy and work, and extrinsic rewards can help you get there. So say, okay, I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week. And if I do it, I'm going to reward myself with a pair of shoes or a new workout outfit or something. That can work to help when it's Thursday and I'm like, ugh, I got to go tonight and I don't really feel like it. It will be enough for me to say, but I'm going to get those shoes if I do it. So I'm going, right? Now, here's the key though. Once working out is motivating to me intrinsically, so once I recognize the value of it, extrinsic rewards will actually demotivate me. So say I'm going to the gym 3 times a week all the time, and then maybe I'm really tired on a Thursday, and I'm like, you know what? I don't need another pair of shoes. I'm not going. I don't care this week, right? So then you have to deal with, the dripping disappointment of letting yourself down. You didn't go. But when we're in schools, I think we heavily rely on prizes and extrinsic rewards. I mean, grades are an extrinsic reward. You do well, you earn a good grade. But the reality is that in a lot of schools, I've seen it turn into almost like just bribery. Sit in your chair and I'll give you some participation points or this or that. And it's like, if we actually engage in experiences and relevancy and get that emotion and experience and repetition all wrapped up, then kids are going to just be excited and engaged to do the lesson as opposed to having to bribe them into completing things. And I see in a lot of schools that the real mode of operation is compliance and completion. It's like a whole just never ending stream of paperwork.
Yeah, it really is that fine line, isn't it? And I feel like the missing key in that piece is the connection the students build with the person delivering that reward, as I use quotation marks. I kind of see, even being a parent with my kids, I've got a 4 and 5-year-old at home. There's this bit in my head that goes, I'm not here wanting them just to do it because they're going to get something. In a sense, where's the buy-in? Where have I made that intrinsic motivation that they go, if I contribute to the family, we're a team, this is a value, this is important to us. You're
Right.
creating that cheerleader energy.
Yeah, and motivation has been studied as a math equation. So it's called the expectancy value equation. Basically, we are motivated when we expect to do well and we value what we're doing. If you think of gaming, like, you said Minecraft, like kids love to play games. I play games. Why do we play games? Well, we never get to a level in a game if we haven't passed the level before where we get the materials we need.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of students that go to school that don't have the materials they need to be successful in the classroom. Would you play a video game where you could wander around the level for the rest of your life, but you're never going to be able to get the materials you need to complete the quest? You wouldn't. You'd be, I'm done. I'm out. A lot of kids don't have expectancy that they're going to do well. And then the value side of the equation is they don't care. And I think in education right now, we have a real problem with relevancy for a couple reasons. One is that we're not connecting learning to things they enjoy or relationships that they have or helping to build the experience and emotion part of the learning equation. We're just doing repetition. And the second piece is that I think really from a bigger lens, what's the purpose of school anymore? Like it used to be content transmission. And so we would teach content and kids would, spit the content back out. And that was at a time when information wasn't accessible to everybody. So knowing a little bit about everything made you kind of a Renaissance person and made you educated. Well, now everybody can read anything they want. That purpose is gone. And then we move to let's get workforce development and get career ready. Well, that's great, except with AI, that's blowing up all of those pathways. And I read somewhere 60% of the jobs in 10 years don't exist today. And that's not new jobs, that's all. And so there's so much shakeup in the workforce that we can't really make that our purpose anymore. And so what I would argue is we really need to have a post-AI purpose. What are we actually doing? And because I think kids are starting to disengage and vote with their feet that, why am I doing this? You're giving me a bunch of work that AI can do for me. So I'll just have it do my homework.
Yeah.
And they're not engaging in that deep learning. And the reality is it's a system problem, not a kid problem.
Yeah.
We need to evaluate how we're teaching, what we're teaching, and what is our overall purpose and what are the metrics for success. Because right now we're not leveraging that motivation equation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the speed that we're going at is to the point where we don't have enough time to put an infrastructure in place because we're I feel like a bit of got our heads in the sand. And if we don't have the purpose, then the whole system is going to crumble. Oh, gosh. These are really important discussions we're having, though, right?
Yeah,
if we understand.
It's scary, but it's also really exciting. It's an exciting time to be an innovator, so embracing that as opposed to trying to push it away. And I think schools are famous for changing around the edges, but the core operating principle of a school is still the industrial era. We haven't even moved out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And perhaps this is the shake-up that the education system needs. And then if we can layer it on top of understanding actually the amazingness of how our brains work, we can create this new system where it's value, purpose driven with skills that students can equip themselves with. So we've talked about how lessons can flop and about these extrinsic and intrinsic motivations. Let's quickly touch on, we hear that the brain needs to feel safe before we can learn. What does that look like in the classroom? I feel like this is kind of the missing piece of our discussion. We've kind of touched on it a little bit.
Yep. So the first piece about safety is feeling a sense of belonging. If you've ever walked into a meeting and you look around and you're like, oh boy, these are not my people, you immediately get a little bit stressed and you disengage. Where if you walk in and you're like, oh, these are my people, then you're ready to go and excited and you're participating. We have so many students who walk into a school and don't feel a sense of belonging. And social scientists have studied belonging through the lens of what they call collective identity. Basically, they studied the military and they said, how is it that people who are so different from each other form really strong ties that last years? They're from different places. The research grew out of the idea of we've been talking about diversity for 25 years, but we've pretty much failed at developing these strong ties. We still hunker down with people that are like us. What they discovered was that the military is really good at building this collective identity. They have chants, they have customs, they have traditions. It means something. They have purpose. They have sayings and mottos and, all these routines. If schools can build that, then when students come in those doors, they belong to something that supersedes all their differences. They become a student before all the things that makes them feel othered or different. So there's different ways that you can build belonging in a classroom, but that's really the foundation is you've got to have a cohesive community, a learning community where everybody belongs. And then the other pieces of safety come into sort of three different areas. One is, obviously physical safety, but one is emotional safety of knowing that you're safe emotionally. That's really built through positivity. It's built through establishing relationships among students where I'm not always the main character of the story. I'm a supporting character that's part of a community. To your point about your kids, like you're doing this because it's good for the family, because you belong here and, everybody does their thing. The second is the intellectual safety. And that goes back to that expectancy and the motivation equation. Is that if I don't believe I can do this work, if I'm coming into school every day and I'm sitting here clueless, then I'm going to disengage and I'm going to be stressed. And then the third is really sort of what they call psychological safety, and the idea of feeling a sense of power or agency that I can ask what I want, that this environment is built for me to be successful.
Wow.
And when we don't have safety, our brain goes into, it sees that as danger. Our brains are not really formed for today's world. Like we still are operating with a brain that was highly aligned with our life 1,000 years ago, right?
Yeah.
But it's still looking for danger and it's looking for situations. And we don't really live in a place that we're in like physical danger as much as you would have been when you lived in, the savannah or something. But our brain still responds the same way. So it sees intellectual or emotional lack of safety the same way it sees a crocodile running after you ready to bite you.
Yeah, I resonate with that, being an emotional being, that, other people's emotions are like, I'm like, oh my God, I don't feel safe. So that sense of belonging, I always felt that when you're trying to bring that into the classroom, the cheerleader vibe I was talking about. And I remember when I did a stint in a summer camp in America, in Pennsylvania. And I always felt that Americans seem to do this really well. And you show it in movies as well, but that team spirit, the chants, the bringing everyone together, the teams and the rallies you would have. And there was really that uniting in that community. And I guess you see that sense of belonging when people join a football team or they support a certain team, or when the Olympics happen, you see everyone uniting as over here as Australians, and you just really feel like you're part of something bigger than you. And I think you're trying to create that safety in your classroom where the kids are feeling, wow, we're like part of something that's really awesome.
Yeah. Well, and you even think about the movie The Breakfast Club. You've got like an athlete and a nerd and a jock and like a burnout and like people from all the different typical cliques of every 80s movie. And they're in detention all day and they create this collective identity of the Breakfast Club and they start to form ties and share with each other and open up. Now, they're only there for one day, so that's not going to form a strong, lasting tie. But we have 185 days a year that we have kids for hours and hours and hours. So we have the exposure to form super strong ties. It's not done just through, we're going to have a chant and then everything else is going to be unsafe. You have to start with that sense of we have shared traditions and things we do. And you also have to have the emotional, intellectual, psychological safety in that classroom.
Yeah, it's like the umbrella, right? Like there's a lot to cover and you kind of go, oh God, that's a lot. They all kind of meld in together if you're going about it in a way of that sense of belonging and that shared community. So you've created the 7C framework for engagement. Can you give us a simple overview of what that is?
Yeah. So it actually has an 8th C now. It's the 8th C is culture. Yes. Yep. So the 7C framework is an operationalizing framework. So a lot of leaders have aspirations and dreams of what they want to see change in their school. So the NeuroWell culture that we've been talking about, to me, is what you need to do to change in schools. So it's your strategy of like, here's how you make things better for students and teachers. Then you have the problem of how do we lead this change? And education has a long history of this too shall pass. We do some training, we get a little bit of implementation, it falls apart, we kind of go back to what we always did before, or we go on to the next initiative. So the 7 C's, so the first C, which is the new one, the 8th, is culture. And it really kind of gets at what we were just talking about. Your staff have to feel a sense of belonging if they're going to engage in the change. So how do you build that for adults in a workplace? Then there's 3 planning C's. The first one is clarity, and the second is coherence, and the third is cadence. And those three help you plan what you want to see. And I'm always amazed when I work with school leaders. I will say, okay, so if the staff's doing what you want more data-driven, student-centered instruction with better relationships among teachers and more engagement in the classroom. Okay, great. Word salad. What does any of that look like if it's happening? What do you see? What do you hear? Right? Mm-hmm. The second one is it coherent with other things you're doing? Like I was working with a school that wanted to do very student-centered kind of universal design for learning instruction, like backward planning and things. And then they bought direct instruction curriculum. So now the teacher's going to lose either way. They can't, those two things aren't coherent. Then you get people who feel less expectancy and they get demotivated. The cadence piece is that we all change at different rates. And we expect teachers to differentiate for students, but we don't do it for teachers. So if you have a teacher who is, seasoned teacher who's done something for many, many years, and you're asking them to really shake up their practice, it may take them actually longer, even though they're a skilled teacher, because they have to unlearn a lot of things. And they have to deal with the identity crisis of, I've been an expert and a local leader in this school, and now all of a sudden I'm like not doing it right. And that feels super uncomfortable. So those first three planning C's help you think about how to structure change to reduce the stress and increase the safety. The center C's are about engagement. So there's collaboration and coaching. And we have a lot of collaborative time in schools, but I don't see a lot of really productive collaboration. And so how a leader can design meetings, design collaboration so that it's productive and that it serves to build a sense of collective efficacy, like we've got this together. And then on the flip side, how do you coach people? And, really the coaching should change based on why a person's resisting. So understanding that can be helpful. And then the last two C's are about sustainability, and there's celebration and communication. And the celebration piece is the one that I think is the saddest part in schools, is we just don't do a good job. And the reality is you need celebration. If you're changing a habit, back to the idea that your brain's a highway, to make things automatic, we have to have that repetition. We have to have persistence over time to get it done. And if we don't have positivity to keep us energized around it, then it fades off. It's like if you've ever, say you've been on a diet and you've lost 15 pounds and not one person has said you look great, or I notice your efforts, you end up at a party and they're serving pizza and you're like, I don't care anymore. I'm just going to have the pizza, right? Mm-hmm. Even though you've been, we can apply some of this brain science. There's 7 conditions that need to happen in order for people to successfully automate change. And so the 8C framework helps leaders set those conditions so that they can get transformation to stick.
I love this. C's, alliteration. I don't need to overthink it. And you could be taking this exact same framework and applying it into your classroom. Yeah, into your family. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Your home. Yes.
How do I get this? I'm going to unpack this even more and like guinea pig it on my kids. And
yes.
I guess even on yourself, right? Ash and I work on different sides of Australia. So there's this element too where if you get the clarity, the cohesion, the cadence, the collaboration and the coaching, I agree with the sustenance, the celebration. I feel like that's always the piece I've let down, that I've just gone, all right, I'm just moving on to the next thing. I'm skipping the sustenance and just keep on kind of going back to the structure and the motivation without incorporating that really critical piece that then weaves it all back into the culture, your 8C that you added, which I think is
it wraps it right back around. And I think the other thing with celebration is it's not just fluff. If you're doing authentic celebration, it serves to build efficacy in your staff, right? Because if I don't know for sure what you mean and you're celebrating something, first of all, it gives me clarity on what are you even talking about? What does this look like? It continues to help clarify what improvement is and what the expectations are. And then it also sets you up with some vicarious experience. Like I listen to you and I'm like, well, she can do this. I can do this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes students are doing the work, but they're not really engaged. I think we can all resonate with this. And from a brain perspective, what's the difference between those two situations?
Well, I think it goes back to that our brain, to have deep learning, we need experience, emotion, and repetition. So when students are just filling out paperwork, they're not learning, right? They're just getting through it, filling it out. And what they're doing a lot now is letting AI fill it out for them.
Yeah.
So I think that we really need, in order to get deep learning and to get engagement in the school and to prepare them for their future, because if we are really just asking kids to regurgitate content that we've transmitted to them, they're never going to be better than AI at doing that. So we're not really setting them up to fill the gap. And I think future success requires that we figure out what are the skills that make us human and what are the skills that we're going to need to retain in order to be valuable in a workforce. Because if all I can do is recall the timeline of the history of my country, well, that's not going to be useful if I can't think fully about it. So I see a lot of, and this is where I think a lot of kids are disengaging because they see it, they recognize it, and they think this is all just paperwork. They've done several national studies in the United States, and they've all had the same really sad conclusion, is that students say, we learn outside of school and we go to school to get credentialed.
Yeah.
But that's what we're doing. Just more paperwork. Fill this form out and then you get your points, and then you get enough points and you get your credit, and then you get your diploma. It's all about credentialing. And I think we've just moved so far away from I teach kids. We're focused on I teach content because those test scores are impacting the system. And so now that kid who's not following along at the right pace isn't a puzzle to be solved. He's a problem to handle because he's going to screw our data up. And so it's shifted the focus of the system away from the human side of the system. And I think we're seeing it with teachers as well. Teachers are exhausted. They're burned out. They're exhausted. They're overworked. They're struggling to juggle all these different unclear initiatives. And it's all about just do more, do more, do more so we can improve our data. It's not about how do we create a healthy place for everybody.
Yeah. It's like when you see people kind of just doing their work and being a bit zombie-ish. That 8C framework is falling apart. It's finding that sweet spot and creating that, what you talked about, the expectancy. There's a lot of pieces that come together. And when it's happening, it kind of organically all falls together. But if it's not, you have to kind of unpack each layer and look at how do we improve this, which is we come back to that discussion of that it's a systematic issue, right? Systemic. It's hard for like one person to make change when you're fighting against a system. These conversations that we're having now, educating, enlightening, and providing that discussion piece of, well, what's our next move? How do we improve this? Let's get a bit tangible now. What's one change a teacher could make tomorrow? So if a teacher wanted to improve engagement in the classroom tomorrow, what's one brain-based shift they could try?
Okay, I've got one that's easy to do. And as of right now, I have 100% success rate with it, with all the teachers. And I've been in probably at this point 65, 70 classrooms to do this. It works every level, every grade, every kind of kid. So what you do is you take your class and you break it into learning sprints. If you think about going to the gym and you're like, I'm going to run on the treadmill for a half an hour, and you're running and running and running, and then you look down, you're like, I've got to be almost finished. And you look down, it's been like 9 minutes, and you're like, I'm never going to make it. Our kids have like 8-hour treadmill rides every day, and there's no interval training for it. If you have a classroom and you say, okay, we're going to do a learning sprint, you know that a kid's attention span's about 10 minutes. And so is an adult. In fact, as people are listening to this, I'm sure their mind has wandered and then they've missed a couple things and then they've had to come back and maybe even go back if they were interested to hear it again, right? Yeah. We have about 10 minutes. Give 10-minute, 5-minute, 15-minute chunks. And when you do the learning sprint, you say, okay, we're going to do a learning sprint. You know, if you're in a high school class, we're going to do 3 learning sprints today. One's 15 minutes, one's 10, and one's 7. Here's the first one. I'm going to give you some instructions. That means you need eyes on me, ears open. So you go through the expectations for that little block of time. Then you start the learning sprint and you hit the timer. And it has to be, this is the key, is it has to be visible. If I'm trying to focus and I'm running out of steam, I can look up and be like, oh, I only have 90 seconds left. I can do 90 seconds. And I stay focused. Then you do a brain break. And that brain break is a chance to do some of the relationship building. Turn to your neighbor and tell them one thing you're really proud of. What's one great thing that happened today? Turn to your neighbor and make a plan to do something kind for somebody in the class. Tell a story about your dog. Like whatever. It can just be a brain break. 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute, whatever. You can vary it. And then you go back to your next learning sprint. In some of the classes, I did this in a computer-aided class where they're pretty much learning online. And the teacher said after a couple weeks, they increased their productivity 30%.
Wow.
Yeah. And the number one enemy for teachers is time.
Yes.
Well, the problem is you're fighting time because the kids are distracted and they're dragging their feet because they are literally on the never-ending treadmill. If I have an 8-hour treadmill ride, I'm going to set that treadmill at 1 mile an hour versus if I know I only have 10 minutes, I could run. Right. And it also teaches some really important brain skills. It teaches time management, like how long is 10 minutes?
Yes.
And what can I accomplish if I'm actually focused for 10 minutes? So you can get a sense of pride and you can start to learn as life throws you big projects, which it will, and lots of task lists, you start to learn how to chunk things and get stuff done. And you get that feeling of satisfaction. So there's a lot of executive functioning development that happens through the learning sprints. And then eventually teachers will get more skilled at understanding how long they need for various things. And so they might start to say, this is a 12-minute learning sprint because I know that's about what we're going to need. We don't need 15 minutes or we don't need, we need more than 10. So they'll start to refine the time. But in the beginning, just put a timer up, start the timer. And then if you run out of time as the teacher and that timer goes off, you say, okay, I'm out of time. Brain break. We'll pick it up right after the brain break. You don't infringe on their break time, right? And then so you're respecting their break time and then they respect your instructional time. And it's been incredible.
I have a confession that when I bought the smartwatch, the main feature I love is the timer. That was my key in the classroom, that we had the timer. It makes sense. It makes it feel achievable. The same is at home of, I got to clean the bathroom. And you're like, I'm giving myself 10 minutes. If I can get it done in 10 minutes, I can do this. There's this young lady on TikTok and it's like, how long will it take? Her page exploded in the last year. She does those mundane tasks where it's like, I'm going to tidy the garage. Because in your head, you go, that is a lot of jobs. That's going to take me a lot of time. Yeah. And then she picks someone, a friend, and they do it. And she'll be like, how long have you been putting this off for? And they'll say, 4 years. And then they're like, okay, well, let's do this. And then at the end, they share how long it took. And she goes, that took us 2 hours and 15 minutes. But in your brain, you had put this perception that's just too hard, too tricky. It's unachievable. I don't have the skills to do it. But doing these learning sprints and then you can see the evidence that supports it, how your brain works. That's amazing. I love this.
And it teaches you how to break that down. And then again, your brain learns through repetition, experience, and emotion. So you have the repetition of practicing the time. You have the emotion of the fun brain break where you have some celebrations and you have experiences over time. If this becomes something that they do in multiple classes, they start to apply it when they're at home and they want to clean their garage or they need to clean their room. They have those skills that they can apply in a different setting.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great one. I recommend all teachers try this. And there's going to be teachers who are like, yeah, I know this. I've been doing it for years.
Yeah. And the key is some teachers are like, I already break down instruction. The key is it visible to the students?
Yes.
That's the important part. They have to see the timer.
Yes.
And then if you're working with older students too, like I used to do sustained silent reading, which was awful to try to do because everybody's always talking. And so I had started these learning sprints with that. And all I did, if it was sustained silent reading, if people started talking, I just hit pause on the timer. And they would be like, why'd you pause? And I'm like, because you guys are taking your break now. Right now, we're in a learning sprint. So as soon as you get back to the learning sprint, I'll put the timer back on. And then they start policing each other like, be quiet, man. I want my break.
You get a lot more agency out of each.
Yeah, it takes away the power struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's keep going with this one. What are some simple ways teachers can spark curiosity at the beginning of a lesson? We've already got a few that we already know, but tell us, Lisa.
I think one of the things that is a huge incorrect assumption that I hear all the time is that teachers feel like they need to teach all the content before kids can do anything with it. And so I'm a big proponent of doing team challenges. I was working with a teacher who was a science teacher and she was doing a unit on electricity. And she normally gave a pretest and then she would do some teaching and then they had a lab. And I said, well, why don't you just throw some wires and light bulbs on the table and tell them they've got 5 minutes to figure out how to light it. And they have to write down what they're doing. And so they started to write stuff down. And then after the 5 minutes, some of them didn't get it lit. Okay, fine. You've walked around as the teacher, you're listening. So now you know what the faulty thinking is. And then just do like a T-chart, like, okay, group A, what did you do? Okay, you did this. I'm so glad you did that. That's a common misconception. Why didn't the light bulb go on? It's just, there's so many ways that you can give kids the chance to do some exploratory inquiry learning. And that experience makes their brain primed to then hear what you have to say. Where if I'm just sitting there listening to content that's conceptual and not concrete to me, then I don't understand it. And you know what? Teachers think about it this way. When you do professional development, the number one thing teachers ask for, which is what you've been asking for, what's the one thing to do? What's this look like? What do I do? And I guarantee you, if I gave a quiz to everybody listening of the concepts that I've taught while we've been on this conversation, they wouldn't get 100%. So the same thing with kids, if we can get them involved in the action, the what do I do? What does it look like? What does it sound like? And connect it to other things they know. Now, when you start to teach, it makes sense and it has a bigger impact.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, in a way, getting away from that pen and paper. How do I engage them on that kind of tangible way without going, here, just do a bit of piece of paper? I mean, sometimes it's a valid tool, but we kind of need to think that's not the only tool that we can use in our toolkit.
Well, and I think that's where AI might have a really positive impact because, I've been working with several teachers that are closing the computer and saying, we've got to find authentic things for students to do that don't involve the computer because they have to interact and, figure it out and problem solve and think. And if that computer's there, they just plug it in and the computer tells them what to do. So I think in some ways, we're going to start to see moving back to more engaging teaching practices because we're going to have to get the computer either out of the classroom or greatly reduced in the classroom as far as what function it serves.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one. Team challenges. Think outside the box. Another one teachers kind of have issues with maybe are routines. So when classroom routines start slipping midterm, what helps students reset from a brain perspective?
So one thing that if you're doing the learning sprints, you get a nice cadence and routine in the classroom. The other thing that I highly recommend, which helps to build belonging, is give students jobs. And so the management of the classroom, when you think about how much time it takes to take attendance and pass all the stuff out and get everybody organized, you can outsource that responsibility to students and then you can, pay them like a job, give them points or give them a reward at the end of the week if they do their job. If they don't do their job, they lose their job and somebody else does their job. But when a teacher has, I've seen teachers that have a tech coordinator, they have a learning expert. So if the students don't understand something, they're able to go to their peer first, a timekeeper to help with the learning sprints. And this is kindergarten through high school. Supply manager to pass out the papers, a cleaner, giving students some of the jobs of the routine in the classroom will help keep you from unraveling the routines because you get caught up in something. The other thing from an emotional safety perspective, so the jobs can help with belonging and giving people a purpose. But I also really suggest having some routines for students that help them have a voice as far as, and so I always use one called fizzy or flat. And so fizzy, I tell them everybody's like a can of soda. And, it tastes gross if it's too fizzy or if it's flat. And that you're like a can of soda. I can't see inside of you, but I know you're carbonated. So if you come into my classroom and you're super carbonated, just say fizzy. And I'm going to give you some grace and space to go calm yourself down and regulate your body. And then you'll be ready to learn. I'm not going to come over and start needling you about your homework and everything else and then have you explode. In the same, I can also come into the classroom and just say flat. And that means I'm just not feeling it today. I'm here, but again, give me some grace and space. And we expect that, if your dog passes away or you've got a sick kid, you expect your colleagues to give you some grace and space because you're not your best self in that moment. But we expect kids to shed all the other contextual things in their life when they come in our classroom. It's just not reasonable. So having some routines in place for that. And then you can gather data if you've got somebody who's saying fizzy every single day and not regulating. You put some thresholds in place. Like if this happens twice in a week, maybe we have a conversation with the guidance counselor. Or if it happens 3 times, we call a parent or, and I've only had a couple kids that have tried to take advantage of it. But once they realized those thresholds were set and now all of a sudden we're activating, they just said, I was just being lazy. Okay, good. Well, don't do it again. Use it when you need it. So I think some of those routines are really important because the other thing too is anxiety is the product of not knowing. So having policies in place, having routines, like having one of the things I talk about in the NeuroWell book is a request to retest. and having a process in place so that if I come into your classroom and I'm fizzy or flat on the day of the test and I don't perform as well as I should have, that I have an opportunity to retest, but that I don't just continue to ask for a retest. So having some mechanisms in place so students know the expectations and know what they can do when they mess up to make up for it.
They're very helpful suggestions, Lisa. I love it. The fizzy or flat kind of just keeps it simple without
super easy.
Too many colors and toolkits. Moving on, we've got the students. We've talked a bit about the students. Thinking of teachers, how does teacher stress or energy affect student engagement?
100%. I have never seen a dysregulated teacher running a regulated classroom. So when the teacher is not managing it, sometimes they're not self-aware. They don't realize how the messaging that they're sending through their actions or nonverbals or tone of voice or anything else. Sometimes they're not regulated, or they don't have a sense of self-control. So there's a couple things that I talk to teachers about doing. One is the purple folder. So getting a purple folder and having a partner. So if you teach in the room right next to me, then you're my partner. And if I am getting out of control and I am feeling my blood pressure rise and I feel like I'm about to be unprofessional and really escalate a situation, then I can just be like, hey, can you run that purple folder next door? And a kid runs the folder. As soon as you see the folder, we switch rooms. And it gives me a minute to get, because behavior is the intersection of biology and context. So that biology is running the stress system and, it's the one that determines whether your thinking brain is present or not, but it's impacted by our context. So when you are in a context that for whatever reason, your brain is saying this is stressful, removing yourself from that context can help you calm your body down faster. And so doing the purple folder switch. And then once you have a chance to breathe a couple times, then you can come back in the room. And then if the kids are like, where'd you go? You could say, I was having a lot of stress and I needed to step out so I could regulate my body. And you model for them that it happens and it's fine. And this is what you do when it happens. And the other thing I do with teachers is called the vault. And so the vault is where if you're my vault partner, I would say, first of all, we start with an understanding that we love kids. We love our job. We love the people we teach with. But today I want to throw the kid out the window. He's driving me bananas. My colleagues annoying me. It's okay to have bad days and to have thoughts of being done with the whole profession. I come to you and I say, I need a vault. And your first question is always, do you need to vent or do you want me to help you solve something? Because sometimes I just need to get it out. And then I'm fine. But we don't, as teachers, we don't have the opportunity to do that because it's like you're bell to bell to bell to bell all day. Is being able to step out and have a vault with somebody. And then once I vent, then we close the vault. And the key is nobody opens it again. So if you see me later in the day, you don't say, hey, Lisa, you feeling better? Because now Becky's like, well, what happened to her?
Yeah.
She's like, well, I heard that this happened. And now it's swirling and, so it has to be private. The other thing is if I ask for your help, then you can help me solve the problem. But it's a completely sacred, safe space where we come into it with the idea of we all feel this way. And I guarantee you, teachers who find a vault partner and do this, your spouses will thank you.
Yes. They're like, we don't want to be the vault for this.
No. The one thing that I do ask the leaders to do, because you can't force somebody to be in a vault. You and I can just decide we want to be vault partners. But to establish that level of safety and trust, I tell the principals, if you start a vault and the teachers want to do this, then if somebody breaks the vault, it is serious. You write them up for unprofessional conduct. It goes in their evaluation. It is serious because you've got to develop that level of true emotional safety among the staff. And then, after a while, if teachers are getting something out of it, then, it's their vault. They can do what they want with it. Those kinds of things I think can be helpful for teachers just because it is such a stressful job. And then I think there's also just putting in place a proactive self-care routine. So, setting a timer, if you're doing learning sprints, have a couple of the brain breaks where you just take in 2 or 3 deep breaths, stretch your neck, do a little vagal nerve massage, stare outside and empty your brain for a minute and then get back to work. So if you do incremental, little doses of self-care, what happens is your body learns to do it without the timer. And so you become a regulated human.
Which makes me think of your purple folder that in my head, I would go, if I'm using that purple folder every day, thank goodness I've got an awesome grade partner. But a bit of me would have this element of self-awareness and go, I'm not okay. I need to put some, self-care. I need to put some classroom care in place for us to be in a more regulated state. Like sometimes you need it in your face, like a purple folder, to go, I'm not okay with how I've been functioning, and I need to do a better job at looking after me so I can look after these kids.
Yeah. And that's where the learning sprints serve dual function, because you're doing the little learning attention span sprints, but now you have all this opportunity on these brain breaks for yourself, or for also you can do whole group. Like, hey, I'm going to teach you something that really calms your body down in this break. And then maybe the next break they can just talk. And then maybe the next break you do something else so you can mix it up. And it helps your body relax and your brain. And it's also helping them. And it's not in a punitive way. Like I see people do like wiggle time, but it's always like, oh, you kids just need to be able to focus. So we're going to do the wiggle thing. So it's almost like you're acting out. So now we're going to move, where the learning sprints gives you proactivity. We're going to do a little break, and we're going to let you get up and move so that need doesn't grow and we don't end up with behavior problems in the class.
Yeah. Resets, you're going, I am safe. I am safe in this environment. We are fine.
We are good.
Awesome. Yeah. If teachers remember just one thing about the brain and engagement, what should it be?
That a stressed brain can't engage. And a lot of the behavior that we see in our classrooms and our own behavior, the thinking part of our brain is not engaged in our decision making about that behavior. We're having automatic unconscious thinking that's driving us to behave the way we are or to feel the way we feel. And if we understand that when there's problems in our classroom, we can reframe those problems and address them through a brain-based way as opposed to escalate them in a power struggle.
Yeah, or like me in a highly emotional state and catastrophize it when I'm just like, it's a lot more simplistic than that. Just look at that brain, your 8 C's. Oh, that's great. I mean, that's a great one. That's a good mantra to have, right? A stressed brain can't engage. So how do you work on limiting that stress and putting these, say, for example, those learning sprints, those brain breaks, and making it achievable? And I mean, there's a whole plethora of things we need to do, but if we're working at it in a layering approach, everything kind of starts to fall into place. Okay, Lisa, that's just so much golden goodness you've shared with us. And we have a little tradition where the previous guest has left a question for you. And your question is, what belief did you create about yourself at school that still impacts you today?
The belief that I created while I was a student?
Yes. So when you were at school, what belief did you create as little Lisa that still impacts you today?
I think that little Lisa always knew that she was very creative about how she looked at the world and solved problems. And I think I've carried that with me my whole life, because I take even the 2 books that we've talked about today, they take sets of information from all different places and kind of weave them together in a new way to look at it, or a framework to do that. So I think that's started way back when I was little, and we used to, the little ketchup cups that you pump the ketchup in. I would make little tea sets out of them, and we would, I was always making stuff with my dollhouse out of like matchbooks, and so I was always very creative about things, and I got a lot of celebration for that, and so I think it cemented that in me and has served me well.
I love that. I love how you picked a positive one too, because I think some people could go down a very dark road with that question. And I just got flashbacks to my childhood of having my dollhouse, and we used to create outfits for them and get my mum's scrap bits of material and just like create whole wardrobes for my dolls. I'm so not a fashionista
oil
now.
For mirrors and like mouthwash cups for trash cans and
Yeah. And I was listening to something, I can't remember for the life of me, but they were talking about, think of what you were as a little person, and probably the job you're doing now or the things you're passionate about now were emulated in your play that you were doing as a child. And I guess that critical piece of play being so powerful. Lisa, an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. I am so appreciative of all the information that you've shared with us and helping us understand our brains better, which leads to us understanding ourselves that little bit better. So thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you so much for having me.
What a powerful conversation that was. Lisa has such a gift for making brain-based research feel not only understandable, but genuinely actionable in our everyday teaching lives. and just really everyday life. And while Lisa is based in the US, her passion for this work truly knows no boundaries. So if you're a school leader or working in an educational leadership role and you're curious about bringing her 8C framework into your classroom, we highly encourage you to reach out. Her details are in the show note, and thanks to the beauty of technology, she'll absolutely find a way to connect and support you, no matter where you are in the world. And if this episode has sparked your curiosity, we know it has, we would love to hear from you. Send us a DM, share your thoughts, or let us know what questions you still have about how the brain works. We're all learning and growing together. There are rainbows ahead, my friend. And together, we're unstoppable. Thanks for choosing to listen to Rainbow Skies for Teachers, the go-to show dedicated to teachers who want to make a big difference in education.
If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a 5-star review or share the episode with a friend. Because together, we're
unstoppable.